Okay, I started the stream.
All right. Give me a second here.
Excellent connection. Looks like it is streaming. And it looks good. I have my nice background going there. My favorite background. And the audio meters on OBS seem to be picking up audio. I'm just hoping it sounds okay.
All right. Let me just check the stream here. Okay. People are stupid.
All right. You saw it then, I gather.
Yeah, it's a good tagline. Okay, I'm going to mute myself and check the audio here.
All right. Testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing. 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 1, 2, 3. Gotta turn off this fan.
Yeah,
All right.
audio's good.
All right. Cool. Then I guess we can start. All right. People are stupid. Wizard's first rule. This is our Woke Centrist book club for the week. And we are starting in on the first book of the Sword of Truth series by Terry Goodkind, published in 1995. I believe this is his first fantasy book, but he doesn't consider himself, well, he did not consider himself a fantasy author, which is probably one of the most ridiculous claims I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
cons-
just watched that all Daniel Green's videos about Terry Goodkind again recently, and that you reminded me of that one where he was talking about it. He said, "I'm not a fantasy author. I'm better." Basically.
yeah, I don't get it. He's a goddamn fantasy author.
Yeah,
I don't know anything about his other literary works, but he's not really known for those, as far as I'm concerned.
I didn't even know that he had written other books.
I think he has. I just don't know really anything about them.
Okay.
But let's just do a quick synopsis on the plot. So the story stars our character Richard Cipher, who is a woodsman, scout, and he happens upon a woman in the woods being stalked by some assassins, and he saves her. Um, they become quick friends, and he goes back to his town, and his brother is I guess he's a very ambitious politician as well as sexual assaulter.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And and from there, they visit his friend Zed, who happens to be a wizard, and they basically gets turned into this seeker, and he's being told that the magic boundaries that divide their land are coming down, and that his father was killed by this man that's looking for him named Dark and Raw. So they go off adventuring and they cross the boundary. They meet some, I don't know what you want to call them, but natives who's,
Oh, you mean the mud people?
yeah, the mud
Yeah,
people,
yeah.
which is, I don't know, they spend a lot of time with the mud people, but
Yeah, I was that's one thing I noticed this time that I didn't remember from when I read the book before, how much time they spend with the mud people. But we were talking last week or whenever it was about how that's actually one of my favorite parts of the book, because they're just their different cultural practices and stuff like that I thought was interesting to get into. Also,
mm,
just you mentioned how Richard and what the hell's that main chick's name?
Kalen, I
Kaylin.
think.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
Kaylin, I think. Yeah, yeah. About how they talk about how they're friends. I thought that's one thing I noticed in this read through this time too, especially towards the first part of the book, how many people are saying like, "Hey, you should be my friend. Let's be friends. We're friends." That seemed
yeah,
really
it's very
unrealistic to
awkward.
me cuz like with in real life with my friends, like you're my friend, but I don't say, "Hey, friend, we're friends. Aren't we friends?" I only refer to you as a friend if I'm talking to someone else about you or something like that.
Yeah, it seems like the friendships in this are very forced and
Yeah,
awkward, to say the least. It's like, oh, I gotta keep expressing that I'm your friend,
yeah,
instead of it organically happening. It's just kind of weird.
yeah,
And that does happen a lot.
yeah.
So they go to this village. His objective is to find the last box of Orden, which is a box that Darkenwell needs in order to rule the world. And in order to be led into the right direction, they need to call a council of elders so that they can find out where to go next.
Did
Eventually,
we
he,
do we get into sorry like before this point earlier in the book, do we get into the more detail about Kaylin's character, how she's like a confessor and
yeah,
Zed.
we will. We'll get all into that. I'm just doing like a quick synopsis,
Oh, okay,
and
okay,
then we'll talk about like the characters themselves,
okay.
key moments, and things of that nature. So yeah, they talk to the mud people. They get sent out and told, "Oh, there's a witch that knows where this box is." And then on their way there, they encounter some type of creature and a wannabe golem from Lord of the Rings. And eventually, this witch ends up helping them ultimately, and she points them to the right direction. So they have to go. And then we get some side story with a girl, right? And she's basically the playmate of some evil princess. And it just so happens that this royal family contains the box.
Wait, what
And
girl?
the evil princess,
Oh, the one who is that the one who tortures
Princess
Richard, or the one
Scarlet, or I think her name is Scarlet.
is that the
I'm
one who
not.
tortures Richard, or the one who's nicer to him, or is it neither?
No, I'm just talking about the little girl. She's like 9.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah, so there's a little plot there, where there's this girl that lives in a castle who's abused by the princess, and there's a wizard that helps her out. Eventually, um, it so happens the wizard gives the little girl the box to go hide the box. And Richard and Kaylin are on their way to this palace at the time. And at that point, they do cross paths with the little girl. Unknowingly, they don't know what she has. So they part ways. Richard and Kaylin arrive at this castle. They do their damage at the castle and leave. And they find the girl. And after that, they get hunted down. Well, first there's like a magic spell that separates Richard from the rest of the crew. And while that happened, a sentient wolf joins up with the crew. So he gets
Oh
separated
yeah,
out by this magic.
that
Or,
like that part with the wolf, that was that like we talked about before. Overall, I think I like this book a little more than you do, but that was another part that seemed like totally unrealistic to me. Like, hey, it turns out I was leaving food for this wolf because uh it seemed like it was following us, and I thought maybe it could be my friend and then it can help us.
so yes, Richard gets separated and captured by a Mord Sith. We get a very lengthy torture section where he gets tortured and has some S&M sex with Denna. Eventually, he gains his, I guess, dignity back. I don't know what you want to call it. And he's interrogated.
That part is weird too. Like basically, like we get a realistic depiction of that. I think when it's happening, like how he just hates his fucking life so much and wants to die because of how much she's torturing him, and
Mhm.
then basically it turns out, hey, I was pretending to be depressed and affected by this shit all the time, but I used my magic powers to uh compartmentalize my mind, and I'm totally fine, bro.
Yeah, it's so dumb. But anyway, yeah, it's her, Denna, and Constance, I believe, which is like the more sadistic one. But eventually he breaks out of it. He kills Denna. Denna willingly dies. So it's not really a fight for her life or anything like that. So his deal with Dark and Raw was you got a week to, what was it? To basically answer up about the box. So he
Oh,
goes
right.
out and he befriends a dragon.
Yeah.
and he flies around on the dragon. He sees his friends, but apparently there's a magic cast on him that makes him look like Darganral to anybody who's his friend. He sees his
That's a
brother.
really like oddly friendly dragon.
Yeah, so the reason why it gets befriended is because somehow, some way, Richard figures out that Darkenwall stole their egg. It's like without really any clues, but anyway, so he meets up with the brother, and the brother actually sees Richard as Richard, which means that the brother is in league with Darkenwall. So he figures that his brother um, betrayed him. Meanwhile, Kalen and Zed get caught by Darkenwall's second in command, who's the rapist pedophile. And Kalen
that
eventually,
this part that character in particular, I thought that part was weird. Maybe one of the perhaps justified criticisms of him, although I've never heard someone say this specifically, but it just wouldn't surprise me at all if someone called him homophobic for that character, which I don't think is necessarily the case, but I think you could easily see that, like how he's a pedophile for young boys and he's like the right hand man of the most evil guy.
well, I don't know if it has anything to do with homophobia,
Maybe it's
because
just a pedophile thing.
the guy is obviously like a rapist pedophile. Like,
Yeah.
it's
I guess
alluded
that's like
to.
all the worst versions of all three of those things, obviously.
Yeah, because I don't, just because he happens to be, well, I guess he's bisexual because he's willing to rape Kaylin.
Oh, right.
So, so
I
anyway,
forgot how he wants to basically rape everyone. I forgot that.
yeah, so she uses, Kaylin goes Super Saiyan, and you hear, well, basically, I don't understand this description, but one of the things that he says about her power is it's thunder without sound. And I don't understand how that's even possible because thunder is literally sound.
That's a
Do
good
you-
point.
I'm like, thunder without sound. Okay. Thunder is sound. So how does that make sense? Is it lightning without sound? Is that what he's talking about? That
Maybe
would
that's
make
what he
more
means.
sense, but he
I
doesn't
don't
say
know.
that. So anyway, she gets control over him. She castrates him and makes him eat his own ball sack. And
Right,
eventually, she kills him or somebody. No, no, Chase kills him, I think, if
right.
I'm not mistaken. But anyway,
Chase seems
Eventually,
like he kind of just like shows up here and there randomly and then leaves for a while and then comes back randomly.
yeah, pretty much. So eventually, they make their way to Darkenroll's, the People's Castle, or whatever the hell they call it, making it some type of allusion to communism of some sort. But at the end, they get to the ceremony. Um, Darkenroll is made to believe that that Richard is under Kalen's spell,
Oh, right. This
and
part is
that
interesting too, actually, I thought. I like this part.
so what happens is that they go through the ceremony, and he leaves out one piece of information that proves to be fatal to Darkenroll,
Mm.
and he basically dies. And then after that, he Richard chops his brother's head off and puts it on a stake. So let's rewind a bit and talk about some of these characters. So I think Richard, the main protagonist, is probably a good place to start. I think up until he gets the Sword of Truth, he seems to be a normal type of dude. Um, the one thing I thought that was extremely off about him is when they met his brother and he kind of hand waved the sexual assault like it was nothing. I don't know what you thought about that part.
Mm. Sorry, my dog was barking. What were you saying?
Oh, I was saying, I thought up until Richard received the Sword of Truth, he seemed like a mostly normal protagonist, except for one part in which he hand waved his brother's sexual assault on Kalen.
Hmm. Yeah, I didn't notice that as much the first time I read it, but dude, since you mentioned that this time, I noticed that more in this read, and like, yeah, that does that doesn't really have any explanation for it.
Yeah, because he's sort of like, oh, my brother's normally a nice guy. He wouldn't do something like that, or I wouldn't think he'd do something like that. He's trying to convince Kalen after he did the sexual assault that his brother is still a good person.
Yeah, I don't think there's any getting around that.
Yeah, so I'm like, okay. And then Kalen explains it as jealousy or something like that. Well, it's like, okay, yeah, the brother's bad. So as soon as the whole betrayal plot point came up, this is the first time I read this. This is the second time I read this now, but the first time I read this, I was like, yeah, the brother's going to be the one that's betraying him. It was so obvious because of the whole sexual assault thing. That and the whole thing about fire.
Oh, I didn't notice that before. That's a really good point, though. Yeah, he really does. He really does obviously like moralize heavily against sexual assault in the villain character. So I guess that makes sense because he wouldn't it wouldn't make sense for him to excuse it from the perspective of the good guys. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm just saying it was kind of obvious to me that he was going to be some type of villain
Okay.
after the whole sexual assault thing. So later in the story, where Richard knows that he had been betrayed, or he's told that he was betrayed by Darkenroll, I was like, yeah, I know who it is. It's the brother. Like, it
Oh, okay.
was,
No,
uh,
I never I did not I did not predict that at all before you mentioned it. No, definitely
oh, you
not.
didn't see that? The brother? Oh.
No.
So I was like, man, the
It's
brother
yeah, it
is,
does sound
something's
obvious
wrong
in
with him.
retrospect though. I guess I didn't think about it that way before.
Well, yeah, I was like, okay, the first time you meet him, he does like this political speech, and then he sexually assaults Kaylin. I'm like, oh, yeah, this is going to be a bad guy in the story.
Hmm. Yeah, that's true.
So, once Richard gets that sword, though, he seems to have anger management issues throughout the story.
Oh, that's interesting. I kind of got that sense about him in general. I guess I didn't really notice before that it started happening after he got the Sword of Truth.
Because if you remember, there was a moment where he was talking to Zed, which is basically Gandalf,
Right,
and Zed, well, he had explained, or at least Richard had explained, that he suppressed like his angry feelings and emotions, and then
right,
Zed encouraged him to use it. So
right.
that's when you saw him just like pissed off all the time. I know a lot of the time when he was with the mud people, he seemed to be on edge a lot.
That's true.
And Kalen was always afraid that he was going to start chopping up some mud people if he didn't get what he wanted.
Yeah, well, like one of the things that she continuously does throughout the story is calm him down when he's about to rage out and do something stupid, I would say.
Yeah, or sometimes it also seems like he's on the edge of that and then he just doesn't do it, you know? Or it's always like this threat, this looming threat that the mud people see, which is why they call him Richard with the temper, or is that what they call him? Richard with the
Something like
temper?
that. Something. I
Yeah.
think it's either that or something similar.
Yeah, so the guy is like raging out all the time after he gets the sword. That's kind of like when he becomes a full on asshole-ish type of guy. Kind
Yeah.
of douchey. Like he has redeeming moments. He's not like an evil person, but he just seems. Sometimes the tone just doesn't seem right with his character.
What do you mean?
Um, like, I don't know, sometimes he seems like, oh, he's super compassionate and cares about everybody, cares about children. And then you see some him do like some borderline horrific things.
Yeah,
Like it's almost a like he's kind of bipolar as a character.
that's interesting. I saw that. I kind of just saw that as more nuance in his character, in him being more complex. Like that he's got some good qualities and some bad qualities, and he doesn't behave the way he wants to sometimes, and he has like anger problems. Like I've had anger problems before a lot when I was a teenager in particular.
Yeah, and I guess we can assume that Richard is young-ish. I think he's probably in his mid 20s, maybe, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's
Maybe.
probably a good estimate. I don't really know.
So his character, and like another thing when I said like the tone of his character, this I remember I mentioned to you when we were discussing this book that he kicks like a 9-year-old in the face.
Oh, I totally forgot about that. Yeah, that's not fucking good, obviously.
Um, yeah, of course the 9-year-old is like a little shit. And he even rationalizes before he does this. He says, "Yeah, it's not you that's evil. It's your influences. That's." And then immediately after that, he kicks her in the face.
Wow.
And from what I understand, does like when the scene is described, it's pretty horrific. Um, I know her teeth got kicked out, her jaw was shattered, and then she's just laying on the floor, and blood is just like pooling. And Denna's like, "Oh yeah, that's pretty good." Denna, Um, well, we'll get back to that, but yeah, there's just some points where he seems a little bit bipolar, like out of character, and it seems like he doesn't make mistakes ever. Except there was one major mistake he did make, which is when he got captured, right? Um, when he was in that cave, it didn't seem like he could have made some other decisions that would have helped him break loose of that magic, but just didn't do it.
Like what?
Well, I know he was supposed to like erase or alter the picture so that he would break free of the magic.
Okay.
And I think instead of just erasing things, he tried to draw the other man who was casting the magic inside of the spell instead of him.
Oh, okay.
That didn't work. But yeah, Richard is a strange character.
Yeah.
He's not really that relatable.
Yeah, I agree.
And
I don't think any of the characters are really that relatable, other than maybe Zed, but not completely. They're I don't know. They're not really that realistic of characters. I don't really mind that.
well,
Like I don't need characters to be realistic.
well, one of the things I've noticed is that I feel like Richard Rawl
That's his
is
last
that's
name.
no, well, that's his real last name, but that's not. Is that
Yeah. Well,
revealed? Yeah,
that's the like Star Wars moment at the end.
yeah, that's his
I am
real
your
last name.
father.
So yeah, there's a Star Wars moment. So Richard Rawl, he seems to be a character that tries to advance using pure reason. Very similar to like Ayn Rand protagonists, right?
Yeah, this is like the obvious Randian objectivism in it.
So oftentimes, especially when he's in and this is so weird, when he's with the mud people and they do their whole spirit thing, he's using like rationality to argue with the spirit,
Yeah.
and the spirit is basically testing him to make sure that he doesn't kill for pleasure. It's a really interesting moment. But there's a lot of like every problem is solved with some type of rational thought or reason. That's what it seems like a lot of the theming.
That's Randian objectivism. Solve all problems with egotistical rationalism.
Yeah, but yeah, that's something interesting I thought about his character.
Yeah. That's the Randian objectivism is ridiculous. But I am an endless defender of Ayn Rand simply because I've only read one of her books, and I'm not a fan of Randian objectivism, but I totally separate that from, in my opinion, like the fact that her writing is so beautiful in so many different passages in Atlas Shrugged, and I don't care about the philosophy. Most of the writing passages are just about describing the setting, which has nothing to do with the politics anyway.
Hmm. So that's Richard in a nutshell. One of the things we didn't mention either is this is also a vengeance quest for Richard,
Mm-hmm.
mainly for vengeance, it seems, because this man, Dark and Raw, had killed who what Richard thought was his father, by disemboweling him and reading his entrails. Um, and Richard Roll himself, one of the biggest reasons he's so like such a big part of this plot is because he's memorized this book that is required in order to unlock the magic, which is why he is sought by Dark and Raw.
Right.
But I'm kind of fascinated to see how his character evolves in the next couple books, just to see what type of tone are they going to adopt to this character. Like, does he continue to be bipolar, or does he kind of mellow out? I want to see what's going to happen to this character.
Yeah. This is like this part and the ending are like some of the reasons other than others that we talked about, like certain parts that I liked, like those with the mud people and the torture parts, and a few other smaller parts are why I think it's good enough to read the next book. And I don't know, since I my opinion of this was like rating it lower than I thought, or than I did the first time, which is what I thought after like being influenced by those videos and talking to you about it and hearing so many people's complaints about it. We'll see if I want to still continue to book 3 after book 2, but we can talk about it either way. Like we've talked about books that neither of us liked before, like Candace Owens' book and like
D'Angelo's.
Fragility. Yeah.
Well, I would like to like going to the mud people. And here's an example of Richard being an asshole and some unintentional humor. Because I did laugh out loud when I read this part in the book. So apparently, the mud people have this strange way of greeting people by like slapping each other in the face. So when they when they get to meet some of the mud people, this someone slaps Kalen in the face. He gets like really pissed off, and Kalen's like, "Oh no, this is how they greet people." And then the next thing we know, Richard punches some guy as hard as he possibly could. Um, I don't know for what reason you would want to do this other than being an ass,
I think he
but
was just like anger uncontrolled.
yeah, so he punched a dude as hard as he could, and I think he knocked the guy's teeth out, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't remember.
But he floored the guy, and I laughed. I was like, "Yeah, that's pretty messed up." But what kind of greeting system is this,
Yeah.
where you greet people by socking them in the face? It's just okay. I'll give you some points here for creativity, Terry Goodkind. I think that is probably one of the most creative greetings I've ever read in literature.
This is like an Irish alcoholic way of greeting each other.
Just socking each other in the face, like as hard as possible. But
Yeah,
even then, we know the mud people weren't going like full force when they were doing this greeting, but Richard decided to just expend all of his strength into a single punch. I thought that was extremely rude, but whatever.
yeah.
But
It reminds me of the Boondock Saints.
yeah. So let's talk about Kaylin and her her story. I think her story is pretty interesting. I found it more interesting than, to be honest, I think out of all of the characters, Richard has the least interesting story.
I'm not sure if I would say that about all the characters, but of like
The most of the characters, like
between,
most of the good guys.
yeah, like I think like my favorite character is probably Zed. Um, but Kaylin is really she has a really interesting backstory, and she's a pretty interesting character too. And I mean, I don't really find that many of the other characters to be that interesting, other maybe than those women who torture Richard. I forget what their names are.
Oh yeah, Denna, the Lord Sith. I really enjoyed Denna's character because I
Yeah,
thought it was
her especially. Yeah,
because
yeah,
she is a bad guy, but it's it's a very interesting tale that they tell about her and
yeah. Like
specifically
she's a bad guy, but she's also like
she was forced
really a
into
victim.
it.
Yeah, like really a victim of her circumstances in a lot of ways.
Yeah, she was forced into those circumstances and had been acculturated to it. But going back to Kaylin is the last of her kind. She is a confessor, and her power is that if she touches somebody, hers is the power of love. Do you want to explain how that works in this story?
Um, I it's something like how she can't she can't touch some she can't touch people because if she touches them they fall in love with her or something like that.
Yeah, because I know she does have some type of control over her power, but there are circumstances in which she can lose control because she's always afraid that she would be put in some type of a circumstance where she'll lose control. I know one of those was in the spirit gathering where they want her to take ayahuasca or whatever,
Yeah.
and she's like afraid to take it because she doesn't know if she'll lose control of her powers or not. I guess another instance in when she can lose control of her powers is during her orgasm. I guess that's kind of what they
Yeah,
allude to.
yeah.
But there's also I don't know how to explain it, but I'm gonna call this callousness because she avoids telling Richard what she is for quite a long time.
Yeah, and Zed knows it immediately pretty much, right?
Yeah, and Richard asks Zed, and Zed's like, "Oh no, you gotta get that from her. I can't tell you her circumstance."
Yeah,
Um, which is understandable, but to me, it's like I'm trying to think of a modern analogy
it would have
to
been better to
equate.
just tell him, I think.
Yeah, like straight out. Like a modern analogy would be like, "Oh, I have herpes, and I'm not going to
Yeah,
tell you
yeah.
about it."
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, in her instance, it's basically fatal. So I'd say it's more like AIDS or something.
Mm-hmm.
Even though AIDS really isn't fatal. Well, it is fatal if you don't take the medications required to stay alive. But that's basically what it's like. She
Yeah.
has this STD that she doesn't want to tell anybody about.
That's why,
And
like, one of the most interesting aspect of Richard's character is his relationship with her, like, especially at the end, where, like, they they can be together in one way but not the other, but they both contradict each other. Like he can be her lover or her protector, but not both. But you kind of have to be one to be the other, but you can't. Something like that.
the problem I do have with their relationship is that very early it is established that they have this kindergarten level of complexity in their relationship. Like
Yeah.
only kindergartners go up to each other, "Oh, you're my friend.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Let's
Yeah.
be friends."
Do
It's
you
like,
want to be
really?
my friend?
It's like, really? These are like adults?
Yeah.
So usually when I
Is it
think back on
recess
that,
yet?
yeah, that early dialogue is just really wooden and awkward.
Yeah,
Um, and it makes me think, like, is this projection from the author? Is this kind of what the author thinks normal human relationships are like, and
I
how
don't
normal
know.
dialogue is like? It's
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's either that or it's just bad writing. I mean, it's easy to do bad writing and write dialogue like that. I've done that before I got better at writing dialogue.
can you be my friend? Let's be
I don't think
friends.
I'm not sure I would ever write something like that, but something similarly cheesy and obviously awful.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Even the romance is kind of jank. Um,
Yeah.
and even when
That the part the tension between like the circumstances, I find those to be interesting, but the whole like the way they act between each other is like it's like the this whole trope of teenagers being it's just goes back to like Romeo and Juliet almost, basically like two teenagers who are really in love even though they kind of can't be, but they're like acting like all like sappy romantic toward each other throughout the book because they really want to be with each other, but they can't, and basically that's it.
yeah, so their relationship. I know he does a decent job at getting it out of that kindergarten phase. Um, but even then, we do get into the characters' heads and we see that they build romance towards each other almost to a degree which is kind of odd. Um, as I don't know, it doesn't seem like I don't know. It's like by the end of the book, they're like deeply in love with each other, which I guess I find a little bit strange. That was so quickly that it happened so fast, you know. Um, but yeah, it's weird. It's maybe it gets better in the other books, but in this book, yeah, it does certainly start off strangely, and the dialogue is not not the
Right.
not the best. But I
Yeah.
do enjoy the dialogue between some of the other characters. Like um, Zed seems to be like the old philosopher, and there's like an interesting part where like everything that Zed says, he's basically the scene stealer of the book. He's always explaining how the world works, as well as some interesting like philosophical things. Like one of the things that I thought was interesting, which I would the reason I thought this was interesting because it totally goes against Randian objectivism, which is when Zed frames the I'm not going to call it relativism because I don't. When I say that, people aren't really going to understand that. But there's a point where Zed explains, and this is probably because of how the sword gets its power. He explains that how morality is kind of relative. Do you remember this part?
Yeah,
Where
vaguely. I don't remember like how the speech goes, but yeah, I remember that message
yeah,
being
he was
expressed.
trying to explain to Richard how Dark and Raw believes that he is doing a good thing,
Hmm.
and how it's a good little philosophical discussion that they have, but it's one of the things I was like, oh, okay. He's like the wise old sage, and he's talking about how one person's point of view, it can be justified versus another person's point of view. And he was doing this in order to show him that the magic of the sword relies on perspective, not on objective truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the magic of the sword is all dependent on the perception of the person who wields it, not based off of the objective truth of the matter. So I think there was one point where he gave the sword to Kalen and told Kalen that a specific tree um, was instrumental in Darkenroll's plans or something, and she chops the tree down. Well, what he said was a complete lie, but because she believed it, um, the sword of truth was still able to chop through the tree using its
Oh,
magic.
right. So the power is based on what the holder of the sword believes to be true.
Yeah, not what's actually true.
Right.
So, yeah, I really like Zed as a character. He's really quirky. You know, he has his little his jargon that he uses. Hold
Mm.
on a second.
Can I get that call?
Yeah, hold on.
Yeah, Zed's a really interesting character. Like uh like Dusty was saying, he's kind of like Gandalf, but kind of a more bizarre and quirky version of him with all these odd habits and way he speaks and way he acts and interacts with Richard, for example, I would say.
Bags. That's one of his sayings.
Oh yeah, that's so
It's
weird.
like I think bags is like oh shit or some
Yeah,
type of
something like
equivalent.
that.
Um, but yeah, I like his character. And halfway through the story, some doubt is sown into Richard. Um, and we could talk about after he meets with the mud people, he gets sent to in the direction of the witch, which where we meet wannabe Smeagol, right? We got wannabe Smeagol. His name is Samuel, right? It's a blatant ripoff of the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
Um, so Samuel has his own precious, which his precious is the sword of truth. He's also a deformed version of a human that got corrupted because of the sword of truth. Well, eventually they get led back to the witch, and again, Richard uses reason again to convince the witch that they both need to deal with Darkenroll, but she tells him that because the witch is basically a fortune teller, right, and an illusionist of some sort, and it's she's actually billed as a very dangerous person. I think in the beginning, um, I forgot her name too, but anyway, we'll just call her the witch. Kaylin refers
yeah,
to the witch as visiting the witch. You're basically it's a suicide mission.
yeah.
But it just ends up being that the witch is a fortune teller, a soothsayer. She sees the future. So she captures Kaylin, and there's a very intricate and somewhat convoluted reason this is happening. She captures Kaylin because Kaylin is the only person who could stop Richard from defeating Darkenroll.
Right.
So it was nothing personal. It's just that Kaylin is in the way. And this is this the point where Richard finally is told what Kaylin is?
Is it then or is it after Like, has he already been tortured at this point? I thought it was after that. Was it before?
Because I don't think the witch would have held back on that information.
Yeah, I don't remember. Hmm.
I believe it's at that point where the witch tells her what's going on, or
Okay.
tells him what's going on. And basically, he tells her the future. It's going to be Zed is going to shoot some fire at you. So here's a test to see if the sword of truth can handle that. And ultimately, Kalen will be your downfall. And the witch does explain that Kalen will be the one to stop him. Um, well, eventually they get out of that. She tells him, "Hey, get the hell out of here. If I see you again, I'm gonna kill you." It's just it's just such a weird interaction. I don't really get why she would want to kill him, but
Me neither.
that's what she tells him. Did you want to talk a bit about the queen and that little kingdom with the little girl and Giller, and it's kind of like a, how do I explain this? It's a point of view of a character, and the girl, I forget her name. It's a little 9-year-old girl that we get to see a POV of, and I thought this was weird,
Yeah,
a weird part of the story. I know Goodkind sets up the queen to be some type of communist or socialist, right? Um,
kind of, I guess. Yeah.
well, basically, the thing that's going on in this kingdom is the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
Right.
So there's this farmer or merchant or something, and they're stealing his crops in order to feed everybody. And he goes all John Galt. He basically goes John Galt, and then she throws him in prison
Yeah.
for John Galting out in front of everybody. I was like, okay, this is Randian influence here.
Socialism defies liberty.
Yeah, so supposedly this nation is socialist. It's not really explained, and I don't know how it's even relevant to the story. But there's a point where Kalen and Richard show up to the city, and we get to see the amount of respect and power that someone of her position has in this part of the world. And it's so much so that she has power over Queen. So Kaylin is an extremely powerful entity in this neck of the woods of the world, which is the Midlands, I believe. That's what they call it.
Right.
Um,
That's the
but
interesting. Do you want to talk more about the divide between the two different worlds? Like,
yeah, so I didn't see a map of this world that he built, but apparently it's some type of continent. And there are three magical barriers between these three areas. To the east is Dahara, in the middle is the Midlands, and in the west is the Westlands. And the barrier between Dahara and the Midlands has fell. Since that has fallen, Dark and Raw has started conquering land, and there's like a lot of conflict and turmoil while he looks for these magical boxes. The Midlands has been in relative, I guess, sequestration. They don't really know what's going on with these other lands because it's very difficult to cross over these boundaries. But Chase, the boundary warden, has noted that the boundary between the Midlands and the Westlands is basically failing. So there is a system where the reason that these boundaries were put up was to sequester the magic within these lands. So Westlands has no magic in it, and the
Right.
lands to the east of the Westlands have greater degrees of magic. But that's how the world is split up. I'm pretty sure maybe in the rest of the series they'll get into that a bit more. But yeah, there's some type of barriers between these places.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting.
We should probably talk about the main antagonist. We really haven't gotten into him
Yeah,
too
Dark and
much.
Raw.
Yeah, he's an evil bastard.
Yep.
Um, who likes to lick his fingertips and fix his eyebrows, apparently all the time.
Yeah.
I think he has some type of OCD, um, because we do see that there's this point where he can't have any of these. Like there's flower decorations everywhere, and if any of the petals touch the floor, he freaks out.
Oh, right.
Um, and I think he has somebody killed because he heard one of the flowers touch the floor, like one of the petals fall.
Right.
He is a master of two types of magic, additive and subtractive.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Like the I thought that the world building and the magic system were the most interesting parts of this book.
Yeah, so Zed, he is a master of additive magic. So that means he can add to things. Like one of the things that he did was he grew a beard, but he couldn't make the beard go away. He had to physically shave it because he can only do additive magic and not subtractive. So Dark and Raw can do both. Subtractive magic apparently comes from the underworld, which he has some type of connection to.
Right.
And I don't know if his dark rituals have anything to do with this, but um, like during the middle of the story, we see him befriend a boy and then kill him. But the weird thing that happens is that he convinces the boy that he needed to die.
Yeah, that's fucked up, man.
And the way that he killed him was horrific. He shoved a funnel down the kid's throat and poured hot lead into him,
Yeah,
or molten metal.
and convinced him that it was like this delicious food.
Yeah, it's super horrific.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's part of like his magic or not to how he convinced the boy to basically put his life in the hands of Dark and Raw. I don't know if that's magically based or he's just that good at persuasion.
I
I
think
have
it's
no.
kind of some of both.
Mm. Yeah, so he's a pretty shitty dude. And in the end, in Dahara, there's basically a religion that revolves around him. And there's some interesting parts of the book where post torture Richard, he actually goes through the mantras that he was taught as a slave to praise Dark and Roll, and he uses these mantras to calm himself. Do you remember this? I think that's
Oh yeah, like when he was getting tortured, those?
well, he had to go to devotions, and he
Right.
spent like 4 hours chanting like a monk. Um, like, oh, Dark and Roll's our savior. He's
Yeah,
blah blah
right.
blah. It's like okay, basically some type of indoctrination. Um, ceremony. I don't know what you want to call it, but he also uses those mantras in different situations. One thing I do want to note about Richard is that he cries a lot.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like, man, this guy's like always crying. And then there's this one particular part where he gets stuck in the hole and he's just like sobbing. The part where he's in the cave or whatever and he gets stuck.
Hmm.
And then he says that's the most scariest thing that he's ever been through in his life. That's what he says later on. But there are other times where he's just like sobbing. I was like, man, this character seems a little unstable to me,
Yeah,
which is interesting. But I don't know if what he is normal to the author, or is this like him trying to engage in some type of discussion about mental health. I don't know.
I
I
think
can't.
it kind of seemed to me like something in between that, like just that, this character has some problems, although maybe he wasn't as aware of those problems like as like maybe the external observer would be. But I think he was kind of like at least trying to allude to those sort of things.
Mhm.
I'm gonna have to go and check on my mom in like 5 minutes or so because she had a really low blood sugar because she's type 1 diabetic, like I said. But I might be able to come back in like 5 or 10 minutes, like if you want to keep it going, or maybe we could end this and do another one after and talk about this and like what we read recently. What do you want to do?
Uh, well, here's what we could do because I don't have to. I'm not going to talk or anything. We could just. I'll keep it running, and if you think you're going to be an extended time, like more than 15 minutes, just tell me. And as if I can keep this open, it doesn't matter to me. Like it's nobody needs to talk. It's fine. Like it doesn't matter. I'm not saying okay. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I'm just saying I don't mind keeping the stream open and
Okay.
then you taking care of what you need to take care of. But if it's going to be like longer than you thought it was going to take, just let me know and I can close the stream. And if you want to talk later when you're
Okay.
finished, that's fine. Like if it's more than going to be more than 30 minutes, just let me know if that's what you think it's going to take.
More than 30 or more than 15?
Uh, like in between 30 to 15 minutes.
Okay. All right.
Uh,
Yeah. Sounds good.
yeah, so just let me know. I'll be here. I'm not going to ramble or anything. The audience. Let me see if I can alter this to say "be right back" or something. I think I can actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I could just put "be right back" at the bottom.
Okay.
Okay, BRB. I'll put that right at the bottom. AFK. All right, I'm saving it, transitioning it, so people will know that we're away from the screen right now. I'll put that right at the bottom.
Okay. I'll turn off my camera then too.
AFK. All right, I'm saving it,
Oh wait, actually, I don't
transitioning it,
need to turn my camera off,
so
but I
people will
will.
know
I
that we're
will.
away from. Oh, you can mute yourself if you need to.
Yeah, I
It's fine
will.
right now.
I will mute
Right at
myself,
the
but
bottom.
I'll leave my
Okay.
pleasant background on. I'll turn off my camera then too.
Oops.
I
AFK.
unmuted the stream.
Yeah, I heard myself. Yeah, when we get back, I guess we could talk about the torture stuff.
All right,
That's
sounds
my
good.
favorite part of the book.
All right, all right. Thanks, man. Yeah, I'll let you know if it's gonna be longer.
Yeah, just let me know.
All right. Thanks.
All right.